Good morning. We're on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph by the Mishnah, 6 lines down. We're learning as a schus proportional and Ve'idlan Chaya Baserach and Shira Bashalamas. HaPesach v'Hachatas sheshachtan shaloi l'shmon kibol halach v'zarak shaloi l'shmon or l'shmon shaloi l'shmon psulin. This Mishnah is a continuation of our first Mishnah. Our first Mishnah was Zevachim. Shenizbuchu shaloi l'shmon. So shenizbuchu we teach to mean that you shechted. You shech the carbon, right? The first Mishnah taught us if you shech the carbon shaloi l'shmon, it's possible. Now we're extending it, even though we've come across this in the Gemara before, but now we're extending it to the other avodas. We actually went through during the Gemara, we went through the limudim of where you learn everything out from. So we know that it's not just, we have inside knowledge that it's all 4 avodas. But again, the 4 avodas are shchita. The first thing is you have to shech the animal. Then Kabbalah, where you receive the blood after the shchita, the blood spurting out. You take it into a klisharis. And then halacha, you bring the dam in the klisharis to the mizbeach. And then at the mizbeach, you zarek the dam. So all these things, the Mishnah is saying, if you do them, shaloi l'shmon, and then the Mishnah adds on oy l'shmon v'shaloi l'shmon and shaloi l'shmon v'l'shmon, that means if you do an avodah partially l'shmon, partially not l'shmon, which the Mishnah is about to give an example of what that means, all the things are going to be possible. It doesn't make a difference if only part of the avodah was shaloi l'shmon. That's enough to passel the whole carbon. Ketzad l'shmon v'shaloi l'shmon. What is the example, like we said, where he was partially lishma, partially not lishma, l'shem pesach, l'shem shlomim. If he had in mind at the beginning to do it l'shem pesach, and then afterwards he switched and he did it l'shem shlomim. So since the carbon doing it l'shem shlomim, right? The first part we're talking about, let's say a carbon pesach, and the first part he did l'shem pesach. He started to shech the animal. The Gemara is going to talk about how is it possible to split up a shchita. You think it'd be instantaneous, but there's 2 simonim. There's a part of 1 simon, but he did part of it. The first part he did properly. Then he switched in the middle. He said, I'm going to do it l'shem shlomim, and shaloi l'shmon l'shmon means l'shem shlomim l'shem pesach. First he had in mind l'shem shlomim, then he switched it l'shem pesach. And now the Mishnah says very clearly what we're saying till now. Shazevach nishpol nifsal ba'arba tvar. There are 4 things that passel a carbon, a shchita, ubekibul, ubehilach, ubezrika. The 4 avodas. If he does the shchita, the kabbalah, the hilach, halilacha, or the zrika, shalai l'shma, passes. Now, I should just clarify, the Mishnah said ha-pesach ve'achatas. These are the things that are possible. But the Mefarshim explain it. The Mishnah is just giving those as the best examples, because over there it's possible entirely. But the same would hold true if it was a different carbon, it was a chatas or an oila, an oila or a shlomim, that it would be kosher if you did these 4 avodas shaloi l'shmon. We're just doing it by chatas and pesach because those are examples where it's entirely possible. It brings out the point better. But the Mishnah is really going on everything we've been talking about till now, that a carbon is loyalu l'baylam l'shem chayva, and Chatas and Pesach are possible altogether.
What it means is that they wouldn't bring it on the Mizbeach?
Yeah. It means like if you zerek the dam, shaloi l'shmon, and Chatas and Pesach. So now it's like a carbon with a mum. You can't continue with that way. You wouldn't be makabel the dam and klisharis. You wouldn't do the halacha and the zrika. You just stop dead in your tracks because it's a pasul of carbon. That's why we do Chatas and Pesach, because those are the best examples. But like we said in the other carbonis, if you remember right on the first blot, we said let's say it was a shlomim, so it's loyal l'shem chayva. They're going to have to bring another shlomim to fulfill their obligation, but you'll continue and you'll do the kabbalah halacha and the zrika. And we even saw Rava says that you have to do all those things l'shma. You're still required to play out the rest of the carbon properly. The Mishnah continues. Reb Shimon machshir behilach. Reb Shimon is chaylik on the Tanakama. He says if you have a machshava shaloi lishma by the halacha, it's going to be kosher, even if it's a chatas and a pesach. It's not possible to do the carbon, to do the avodah of avodas hadam without doing these three avodas. But it's possible to avoid halacha. How is that? If a person shechts the carbon next to the mizbeach, and he's mekabel the dam, and the dam is now ready to be thrown. It's right there already. There's no place to go. We don't say like when people finish the aliyah, you're supposed to go the long way around the bima. You don't say you just go around the mizbeach. You do a circuit so you can have a halacha. Halacha means to bring it to the mizbeach. So when Rav Shimon says once you're already there, then you can avoid the requirement for halacha, and therefore, since it's not required, it can be avoided. Therefore, it's not going to pasel shaloi lishma. Rabbi Elazar Omer, hamahalach b'makom sheyitzarech lahalach machshava paiseles. If someone goes in a place that he needs to be do halacha, then the machshava pasels, the machshava shaloi lishma b'makom she'ein tzarech lahalach ein machshava paiseles. And if he goes to a place that he doesn't have to go, it's not going to passel. This is going to be all the way at the end of the parak. We're going to get back to this. There's a complicated explanation of what this is talking about. What is this referring to? We're not going to do it till after Yom Kippur. So we said, the Tanakama had said, leaving aside Reb Shimon, because he's not really relevant at this point, the Gemara said, Kabbalah, together with Shchita, Kabbalah, Halacha, and Zrika, all passel when you do them Shaloi Lishma. Practically, Gemara Kabbalah mi passel, is it true that having a machshava Shaloi Lishma passels the carbon vatanya? Bekrivu zu Kabbalah Sadam. The pasuk says, "V'shachar is ben abaka l'fnei Hashem." He's talking about an oila. You shecht it in front of Hashem. V'krivu b'nei Aaron hakayim es adam. And they'll be makriv the dam, v'zarku es adam al mizbeach saviv asher pesach ayol made. So we said in the Brisa hikrivu, that's a reference to Kabbalah Adam. Ata oiber Kabbalah Adam ayen el izrika. I might say, how do you know it's Kabbalah Adam? Maybe when it says v'kriva, it means zrika. That means we're talking about coming to the mizbeach. That says v'kriva nakayin es adam v'zarku es adam al mizbeach. Says you makrav it and you zayrik the dam on the mizbeach. So hakrava, has a mashmayis that you're doing the avodah, and it's saying al mizbeach. So maybe the krivai also is a reference to the zrika, which is the thing that's immediately on the mizbeach. So it says v'zarku. Emma, hare zrika. It already said zrika. Hamani makayim v'krivai. So what do you need? V'kriva to mean zrika, and then zrika to say zrika. So v'kriva zu Kabbalah Sadam. That's telling you the din of Kabbalah Sadam. B'nei Aaron hakayanim. Then the pasuk continues that B'nei Aaron hakayanim should do it. Shtei b'kayin kasher or b'kli sharis. That's telling you that it has to be done by a kayin who's kosher to do the avodah, and b'kli sharis that he's wearing his begadim of a kayin. So far we're in good shape. The Tanakama seems to agree with our Mishnah. It said, and this Brisa is saying that the Zrika and the Kabbalah, both of them are required to. You have to do both of them lishma. But now we get into the problem. I'm sorry, we're not up to that yet. Rabbi Kiva was not satisfied. You said just because it said B'nei Aaron HaKayanim, how do you know that means that it has to be b'dafka kosher and they have to be wearing their begadim? So he says we need a second pasuk to tell you that this reference to B'nei Aaron HaKayanim is talking about kosher Kayanim. So he says it comes from later on in the pasuk. When it says Eila Shmois Bnei Aaron HaKohanim Meshuchim Asher Mali Yadam Lechayin in Bamidbar, where so we use the same lashon of Bnei Aaron. Since it says over there, it's talking about the sons of Aaron, meaning talking about literally Elazar and Isamar, that they were doing the Avodah, and we know that they were Kehanim Ksherim, and that they were doing the Avodah of the Miluim. So they were doing it with Klish, and it says that they wore their begadim. So therefore, that tells you that when it says Bnei Aaron over here, it's also talking about the begadim Ksherim. So Zakti Gemara, we still haven't gotten yet to. We said Kabbalah. We said Rekriva is reference to Kabbalah Saddam, and because we already said Zerika. Amr Tarfin. Tarfin said on this. He continued talking about this brisa. A kapach as a b'ni, my children should be cut off. I don't know why he said such a horrible klal on himself. Im loisha mati, if I hadn't heard lahavchin hefresh ben kabbalah zrika. I know that there's some kind of distinction between kabbalah and zrika, even though we learned that there's a avodah of kabbalah and there's a avodah of zrika, but I know that there's a distinction between them. Mainly lefarish, but I don't remember what the difference is. Amar Rabbi Kiva volunteered. Ani afarish. I'm going to explain it to you. Rabbi Kiva had remembered. He was able to darshan. He was able to deduce on his own what it was that Rabbi Tarfon had forgotten. Kabbalah, by a Kabbalah, when a person is in the Kabbalah Adam, like also by machshava kamaisa. At this point, the Gemara understands that to mean that we don't treat a Kabbalah like a Maisa, a Machshava of Kabbalah. When you have a Machshava, it's either Shalai Lishma or a Machshava's Pigel, right? What we've been talking about till now in this Masechta was talking about the Machshava Shalai Lishma. When a person has in mind, he instead of doing this Shchita, L'Shem, let's say it's a Chatas, he has a L'Shem Ayla. That's a machshava shalei lishma. A machshava's pigel is a very specific thing, and this Gemara over the next blot is going to go very much into this specific. A pigel, a machshava's pigel, and I'm telling you in advance, but it's going to be clarified on the blot that it's when you have a machshava while you're doing some of the avodas or one of the avodas, you have in mind that you're going to do some consumption of the carbon, or the dam of the carbon, or the basar of the carbon, chutz lezmani. You're going to have in mind you're going to do it after the time that it's supposed to be done. So a classic example would be you shech the carbon, and you have in mind that you're going to be zayrik the dam the next day. You have to really do the zrika the same day that you did the other avodas. You have to do everything in one day. You have to do the shchita, kabbalah, halacha, and zrika in one day. He has in mind he's going to do the zrika the next day. But it also could be, like I phrased it carefully that way, that it means some consumption of the carbon. It could be you have in mind to eat the basar of the carbon. If it's the kayanim have in mind to eat the basar of the carbon in a week. That's also a consumption of the carbon, of a part of the carbon chutzos man. And another thing could be the aktaras emurim. There's certain parts that get burnt, certain parts of the basar of the animal, the chalev, that have to be burnt on the mizbeach. So he has in mind to do that. That's also considered a consumption. So at this point, to get it back to what Rabbi Kiva was saying, ani afarish kabbalah also by a machshava kamaisa. We don't treat the machshavas, meaning a machshava shalei lishma, or a machshavas pigel, or it l'chayr would be even a machshavas chutz l'mkaima, which is a third type of machshava. It's not that when you do it shaloi lishma or you do a machshavas pigel, it's not going to be possible. Zrika asaba machshava kamaisa. But zrika, we do have a din that doing the zrika is going to make the carbon possible if you do it al yedei, if you have a machshava shaloi lishma, machshavas pigel. Another chiluk, kiblu b'chutz enechayev kares, zarka b'chutz anish kares. Now we're moving away from the din of machshavas And we're saying another difference between Kabbalah and Halacha, that if you do the actual Kabbalah outside of the Chotzer, which is where you're supposed to do the Kabbalah, there's no Chiyuv Kares. The pasuk that says the Chiyuv Kares is only, we've seen this before in this parak, it's only on the Torah only says that Legabi Zrika and Legabi Shchita, that if you do those outside of the Chotzer, there's a Chiyuv Kares. It's just the Torah, the pasuk is only refers to those.
If you do Shechita, then Kabbalah has to be right there.
Yeah, but I'm saying the Torah doesn't say. The Torah says if you do the Shechita, you're saying how could you ever have a Kabbalah that's b'chutz where you weren't already chayav kares for the Shechita b'chutz anyway?
Right, unless there's a separate chorus.
Or maybe the animal is like right by the boundary and you're standing outside, the kohen standing outside, and the animal's inside. So he's holding the kli outside. Seems like yeah. Or I could tell you a different thing. He's outside, but the chiyuv kares is only for mezid, and if he, for example, knows that he has to do the Kabbalah inside, but he doesn't know about the shechita that has to be inside, so he can't get kares for the shechita because he's a shaygig. That's the Gemara. So that's a second chiluk between Kabbalah and Zrika. Kabbalu psulin ein chayiv and love. If a third nafkamina between Kabbalah and Zrika, that if someone who is pasul is makabel, someone who's not a kosher or kohen is makabelet, there's no chiyuv of misa b'dei shemayim zakur psulin chayiv and love. But if the Zrika is done by a kohen, by someone who's not kosher to do the Zrika, he gets misa b'dei shemayim. But in any case, so before we continue, which the Bryce is going to continue talking about this, but we said Kabbalah le'asaba machshava kamaisa. We're saying Kabbalah is not, if you do a machshava lishma, it's not going to be possible. That l'chayra, this is the Gemara's kasha. Right at the beginning we said the Kabbalah mi pasla. Our Mishnah said that all four avodas, when you do them shaloi lishma, pasels the carbon, and now it's saying that you're doing a Kabbalah shaloi lishma is not going to passel the carbon. Okay, but now let's continue with the Bryce. So Amalei Rebbe Tarfon ha'avoda said made a shvua on the avodas that we do on the mizbech. It's a strong form of a shvua. Emetiach yamin usmail. I'm not going to divert. I'm not going to change from what you said, even right or left. Ani shamati vein lefarish. I had heard this and I wasn't able to remember it. Ata dairish umaskim l'shmua, and you figured it out on your own. You darshaned and then analyzed, and you got exactly right. The lashon is amalei, and this is what he said to Makiva: "Kala parish mimcha, parish mechayev." He said, "Anyone who leaves you, it's like they're leaving their life. You're separating yourself from the source of life. This is exactly what learning is supposed to be about. With your powers of analysis, you were able to figure out exactly what I had heard." In any case, we have our kasha, right? We have the stira. Our Mishnah, we had said, we did all the four avodas. We do them shaloi l'shman as possible. And now we said that by Kabbalah, which we're assuming now means that you could have a machshava shaloi l'shma and it's not going to passel. Amarava loy kasha. Kam b'machshavas pigul, kam b'machshavas shaloi l'shma. He says our Mishnah is not talking about a machshavas pigul. Our Mishnah is talking about shaloi l'shma. That memra he's saying from Rebbe Kiva, that's talking about pigul. That's not talking about shaloi l'shma. When we say that you have a machshava of Kabbalah, that Kabbalah is not going to passel, that's talking about only about pigul, not shaloi l'shma. Our Mishnah is talking about Badavka, Shaloi Lishma, and that Machshavas Kabbalah, Shaloi Lishma is going to passel, but Legabi Pigel, Kabbalah is not going to passel. They cannot. I mean, I'll prove to you that our Mishnah is not talking about Pigel, the Tani, Shazevach Nifsal. It's says a zevach becomes possible. Like Tani, mispagel. We didn't say it becomes pigel. If you would say if it would become pigel, that you get karis, it should say that. Nifsel just means that it's no longer a kosher carbon. But pigel has a special meaning. That means a chayiv karis. So if it was talking about pigel, it should have said so. So if I say our Mishnah is not talking about pigel. Shma mina. So this is a good ride. In fact, the Gemara, you still haven't really made things great. You're saying that the Brisa is saying that the Brisa that we just brought is saying that a machshava by Kabbalah is not going to make, a machshava chutz l'zmane by Kabbalah is not going to make the carbon pigel. He's not going to make him chayiv and pigel and passel the carbon. In fact, there, machshava's pigel le passel by Kabbalah, this is not really any better. We had a braya from our Mishnah that Kabbalah is going to passel shaloi l'shma. But we brought a brisa where Rabbi Kiva said that Kabbalah is not going to passel. He said, no, that's talking about pigel. A pigel also passels by Kabbalah when you do the Kabbalah with the machshava chutz l'zmane. Mash pigel epasla Kabbalah v'atanya yachal yitehei machshavas me'eles ela b'zrika b'lvad. I might think that a machshava is only gonna work to passel with a machshavas pigel only by the zrika. How do I know the other avodas? And we say shchita and we say Kabbalah specifically. So the Gemara has the pasuk a little bit wrong. Let's look at the actual pasuk. The pasuk says the carbon. This is where the source of the isser of pigel and the psul of pigel is. If he'll eat from the basar of his zevach shlamav, of his shlomim that he brings, but yom hashlishi on the third day, which is too late, you only get 2 days to eat the shlomim, not 3. Lo yeratza, he's not going to get a kapara. It's not going to be accepted. Hamakar v'isay lo yechashav lo. It's not going to be counted for him. Pigel yiyah, it's going to be pigel. And the person who did it, he's going to bear his oven. And he's going to be chayiv karas. So this is the pasuk that tells you pigel. Now, it's important to keep in mind this pasuk does not seem to be talking about pigel. It seems to be saying that if a person actually ate the carbon outside of the third day, but the Gemara is going to prove later on that it's not talking about where he actually did. He's eating the carbon, but it's talking about he has a machshava. He's thinking to eat the carbon outside of the third day, after the zman. But in any case, it says lo yerotza. So yerotza is mashma lashon of zrika. That's when you get the kapara, is by the zrika. So therefore, the Torah says lo yerotza pigelhu. So we say b'dvarm hamiviyim lidei achila kasam medaba. Only those things, it says anything that will bring him to be able to eat it, which is, Rashi explains, that means the 4 avodas. The avodas adam is what makes the carbon able to be eaten. Until you'd finish the avodas, you're not allowed to eat the basa. If you bring the shlamim, until the avodas are finished, you certainly can't eat the carbon. As we're going to see in a minute, there are other things you also have to wait for, but while these are underway, you're not allowed to eat it. So, if you're saying that what qualifies again, we're still in this brisa that's going to be a stira to what we said before, and we already actually showed the stira, right? Because we said that Kabbalah is one of the avodas, and since it's maybe lidei achila, it's going to be it's pigel. It's going to be pigel if you have a machshava by the Kabbalah. But for the Gemara, the brisa is still continuing. Why are you saying that it's only the 4 avodas? We know that there's no dim pigel when you have a machshava during the shvicha shirayim, when you have the leftover dam after you did the zrika on the mizbeach. There's a chiyuv to pour out the dam, and you also have to then bring the portions of the animal and the chaylev that goes on the mizbeach, that gets burnt on the mizbeach. You have to do both of those things before the owner is allowed to eat from the basar, and the kain as well, his chaylev. Talmud Leimer, B'yom hashlishi lo yerotze. Hamakar v'yisay lo yechashiv. So it says lo yerotze. Lo yerotze is a mashmayis, is again, like we said before, it's a reference to Zrika. Zrika b'chlal haisa. Zrika was included. We already said that it has to be something that is, it says lo yeyachal, so that tells you it has to be something that's going to be mata la'achila. So Zrika was included in that. So why do we say lo yerotze, which is a lashon of Zrika? Again, we don't need the Zrika specifically. Kapara, just like Zrika is something that it's an avoida that's if it's not there, he's not going to get a kapara. Afkal avoida makeves kapara. So too, in order to be chayiv pigel, it has to be an avoida that's ma'akev the kapara. Like we've seen a number of times, we had this legabe our question of whether ashram has the same thing as chatas. We said, and the pasuk over there was talking about during the zman of aktaras emurim. We know that aktaras emurim and shirayim as well are not ma'ak of the carbon. If you just leave them out, you're going to get your kapara. You're not going to be able to eat. They are ma'akav that you can't eat afterwards. You're not going to, the basar of the carbon is not going to be available to be eaten, but you will get your kapara nevertheless. So therefore, that's what the Torah is telling you. It says first. So again, it says first, lo yeyachal. What was the pasuk? So what's this lashon of achila? That tells you that it has to be something that's ma'akev in the achila. So that tells you the four avodas. You'll say maybe that includes even haktaras emurim and the shvicha shirayim, which are also ma'akev in eating the carbon. So then, since we say lo yerotza, it's a reference to zrika. So it tells you it's not just enough that it's something that makes it capable of being eaten. It also has to be something that's ma'akev in the kapara that you get from the carbon, and that's only the four avodas adam, not the shvicha shirayim and haktaras emurim. In any case, we now have our question, right? That we had said before. Just to, we don't really have time. Let's quickly set up, right? Our Mishnah had said that all four avodas, if you have a machshava, shaloi lishma, it's going to passel. We said, and then we asked the kasha from a brisa that said Kabbalah is not ma'akav. We said no, that's talking about pigel. If you have a machshava chutz lizmane, which is the machshava's pigel, then that's going to passel. That's not going to passel during Kabbalah. So we ask from this brisa. This brisa is saying that Kabbalah is also ma'akav. If you do a machshavas pigel by Kabbalah, it's also ma'akav. So how we answered our stira between the brisa and the Mishnah that we said that the brisa says Kabbalah is you can't do a machshava by Kabbalah. We said that's talking about pigel, and our Mishnah is talking about shaloi lishma. We're saying, but you didn't help anything. Pigel also. If you do, we were seeing from this second brisa that Kabbalah is also going to be an avodah legabe pigel. That it's if you have a machshavas pigel during Kabbalah, it's awesome. So elaloi kasha, where it says Amud Beis, Hada amaharini sheichet amanas lekabel damal. This is now going to bring everything back to the way we had understood until now. That which we say. That which we said that Kabbalah, the Brisa had said that Kabbalah is not going to be a machshavas pigel. That's what he says. I'm shechting the carbon that I'm manas and I'm going to do the Kabbalah lemachar. Meaning he's doing it. What we're talking about is what machshava you have. Like we said, zrika. When you do a zrika with a machshavas pigel, it doesn't mean when you do. We said all four avodas are included in pigel. That means that if you do have during the shchita, Kabbalah, halacha, and zrika, you have a machshava to do something that where the blood, where the carbon is consumed. Chutz lezmane. So let's say he does the shchita and he has in mind, it could be one really of three things. He could intend to do the zrika, chutz lezmane. He could intend to do eat the carbon itself, chutz l'zmani. I have in mind to do the kabbalah murim chutz l'zmani. These are all consumption of the carbon. But if you have a machshava when you do the zrika to do the kabbalah chutz l'zmani, that's not kabbalah is not a consumption of the carbon in any way. So that would not be possible. So when we said kabbalah is excluded from pigul, it doesn't mean having a machshavas pigul during the kabbalah, which is what the Gemara had assumed until this point. It means, like we have known from the beginning, and this is the way we've always been describing it, that you have to have a machshava by pigul, not you have a machshava about kabbalah, and it means for halacha as well. After when you do the shechita, you have in mind to do something that's not consumption, then it's not going to be pigul. But where did we say that Kabbalah is going to have a din pigul? That's where he did the Kabbalah with a machshava to do the consumption of the dam, and we give you the example of being shayvach the shirayim, spread to pour out the dam. That's where the dam is going to be consumed by the ground. So that is going to be a machshavas pigul, and you're going to be chayiv kares for it. Amalei ahumer rabbanon l'rava. Ushvicha shirayim aktar semurim lepasalu hu machshava. Are you trying to tell me that shvicha shirayim and aktar semurim, when you have a machshava by them of pigul, it's not going to pasel? But nan yachal loitehei machshava mayelas ela bachilas basar. I might say that machshava is only going to help when you eat the basar. How do we know shvicha shirayim and aktar semurim? We're being marbo that it's any achila, whether the achilas adam or achilas mizbeach. So l'chayr, that's telling you that it's not just achilas basa that's going to pass; it's also achilas shirayim. Well, when do we say that shvicha shirayim is excluded? That's where he said, I'm doing the zrika, I'm anas to be shayvach shirayim. So then shayvach shirayim is considered a consumption of the carbon. But if you're shayvach shirayim and then you're having the machshava during the shvicha shirayim, like we said, that's not shvicha shirayim. It's like haktar seimurim. It's not ma'akav in the carbon. So therefore, if you're having a machshava while you're doing it to do a later consumption of the dam, that's not going to be pigul. It's only on the actual avodah sadam if you do shchita kabbalah halacha or zrika.
What's the difference?
What we're saying is that when we say that shvicha shirayim is not going to have a din pigul, it could be talking about. It's a very basic distinction. Are we talking about where what you're having in mind is to do the shvicha shirayim? Or are you doing the shvicha shirayim, having in mind to do a later thing, chutz l'zmani? If you have in mind while you're doing the shvicha shirayim, that's not pigul. Pigul has to be done by one of the avodas that are ma'akav in the carbon, the kapara. So that's the 4 avodas adam. Once you get to shvicha shirayim, you're past the point of zrika because the carbon, you already got you. Once you do the zrika, you already had your kapara. There's no going back. You're not going to have to bring another carbon. Okay. But what was it saying that shvicha shirayim is going to have a din pigul? It means if when you're doing, for example, your shchita or the kabbalah or the halacha or the zrika, and you have in mind that you're going to do the shvicha shirayim chutz l'zmanim. Yeah, this is a very, very important distinction, which is different than the machshavas l'shma that we've been talking about until now. Machshavas l'shma, we say a person has machshavas shalei l'shma by, let's say, by the shchita. It means I'm doing the shchita, and I have in mind it should be for a different carbon. It's very straightforward.
Yes.
By pigul, your machshava is you're thinking about doing something later in the wrong way. It's not that you're doing the shchita now. You're not thinking you're doing the shchita. You're doing it, but inside. You're doing it obviously at the right time and in the right place. You're actually doing the shchita. Mm-hmm. Let's say you shech the carbon and you say, I'm going to do it chutz l'zmani. It's ridiculous. You're doing it during the Zman. It doesn't make a difference what you're thinking. You could say I'm thinking it, but you're obviously not thinking because you're doing it. And you're doing it also in the Mizbeach. If you're doing Chutzul Mizbeach, then that will passel just because it's Chutzul Mizbeach. It doesn't make a difference what you think. So you're doing it, but if you think while you're doing it, and I'm going to do, for example, the Zriko or the Shvicha Shirayim or the Haktaras Emurim, or you can actually eat the basar of the behema. You're going to wait a week and do it, which is Chutz Lizmane, that's Pigel, and there's a Chi of Karas on that.
What's this chapter? It's like Kasha, what are you saying right now?
So we had one brisa that said Shvichas Shirayim. I'm saying that Kabbalah is, I'm sorry, which Loikasha? That's the earlier one.
I got this set up just now. So Loikasha, Hadam is very
So that's an earlier thing. Hadam. That was answering a different question. We said one place that Kabbalah.
The second Loikasha.
So the second Loikasha, where we said Lagabi Shvichas Shirayim. One time we said that it is going to have pigel. Another one time we said it's not. One was talking about whether you had the machshava about Shvicha Shirayim, which there is a din pigel on that.
Okay.
And one is during the Shvicha Shirayim, you had a machshava to do something later. And that's since Shvicha Shirayim is not ma'akev in the carbon. That means if you skip the Shvicha Shirayim, you skip the Haktas Emurim, you already had the kapara. At that point, you're having a machshava about what you're going to do.
Which was done already.
The Zrika, yeah. Okay. I'm reviewing the Breder of Chia. When is it? Yeah, I think we're going to start Slichas now. Okay. I have to stop over here. And this is because it's